Great. All right. Well, Mary Oliver, today's you were working with the language of soul, and for a few times because I realized talking to my 17-year-old grandson, Devin, that he had no idea about soul. He had no vocabulary for soul. I mentioned the soul one day, and he says, "What are you talking about?" And we had a conversation. I realized he had no vocabulary uh, for the huge part of of our consciousness, the heart and soul. That vocabulary is gone. So this, I'm doing a few teachings just on people who really have the language of soul. They just emit soul. And Mary Oliver uh, is our mentor today. I have her book, Devotions, where it's her collection of her selected uh, poems at the end of her life. She put it together, and I really recommend any of you to get that book. You will not be let down. And on any given day when I can't walk the road, it was a brilliant walk today. Uh, I'll read Mary Oliver. It's it's almost as good. So three poems today, and I'm going to read the three of them just straight, and then double back and just share what I resonate with, and in relationship to the poems, they're and what and how they're actually bringing out the soul. And I chose these three poems in the order they're in because I think it gives us a progression of view of the soul. So I'm just going to read these poems now, and listen to them with the ear of your heart. Don't worry about Mary's poems are never hard to figure out. Uh, they come from her soul, her heart to yours, and so they'll translate. And then we'll go back through it again, and I'll just make some comments. And then you have three great poems. Two of these I know by heart. The first one I don't, but the other two I could recite. I recite on the road all the time. So the first one is, these are all famous. You easily find these, look them up after. This one's called The Summer Day. And we're at the end of summer now, thank goodness. And lovely to feel fall. The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she shifts, now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? This is the journey. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began. So the voices around you keep shouting their bad advice. Though the whole house begins to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough in a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. And her last poem, one of her most famous, is called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. I stop on the road anytime geese are flying by and recite that poem. That's what I know by heart as the journey. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to just sort of go back uh, through and just share some ways I resonate with the lines and what they tell us about soul. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. Well, she starts out with the kind of questions anybody has, and they're big questions. Who made the world? Who made the swan? Who made the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? Who made all this? But then the first thing that she teaches about soul here is the particularity. This grasshopper, I mean. And then she describes it only as Mary Oliver could describe it, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearm and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. Yeah, the first thing about soul that Mary Oliver knows is it's a kind of sacredness of the particular. Her poems are very she that's just part of her language. Uh, she talks about this grasshopper, and then she pivots a little bit. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down into the grass. That's something. It's about the about soul and about having a contemplative practice. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. And when we pivot out of the talk to actually doing our silent sitting, we're talking about not no words. We're talking about going into silence and just being aware. That's it. And she is a master of that. She's not in churches. She's out in the fields. And then she says, I do know how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass. I mean, nature for Mary Oliver is the great cathedral. It's the sacred. She sees the sacredness in this grasshopper, you see. Uh, and then she says something that's there's a lot behind this. I know how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields. This is what I've been doing all day. Well, she tells about the fact that I mean the reason she went into nature for and found the sacredness was basically your survival operating system moved around. Her father was not it wasn't safe to be in the house. Wasn't safe to be in her home. Her father was a predator. And so her only way of survival is she'd get up before her father got up very early, grab her, she had a little writing pad and a pen, and she'd go out the door and she felt safe out there, you see. And uh, and she says, "This is what I've been doing all day." She proudly said that her father moved around. Things were very unstable. Her home life was very unstable. They moved around, but wherever they were, she said she set the record for tardiness and for absenteeism in all the school districts she was ever in, because she would just go out to the field and then get and that was her school. She says, it's what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? She pivots to the real question for she's asking herself, and that also it's a soul question. Uh, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Yeah, that's a soul question. It's a question that leads you into mystery. Merton at one point he said, don't ask me how I comb my hair. Don't ask me this or that. He said, ask me what I am living for. See, so part of the thing to understand about the language of soul and the soul itself is this part of our consciousness. The soul is, it's directional. It's journeying, which is our next poem. It's going somewhere. It's not the soul does not want to just status quo. The soul is expansive, as we'll see in the next poem, the journey. That the other part of our emotional, life, the shadow, the wounded child, they just want status quo, and you can understand that. You can understand that. So, yeah, the soul is directional, and the soul is really asking you this question: what is it? It's asking all of us right now this question: what is it? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? You know, uh, to even take that question in and live in the mystery of it is enough. And you could sit with that question in the silence, opening your heart to the universe and to the question. Great way to sit. So she is one of the most soulful poets you'll ever meet. Now, this idea that the soul is directional, the soul is on a journey, she picks that up. This is a very Mary said that this poem virtually was uh, she just received it. Well, she doesn't mess around with her poems as received too much, but this one she said she can't remember ever changing a word of it. The journey. One day, maybe this question dawns on you. You just say, it's just this starts with the status quo. It starts with now the home that she talks about here is alive. It might be a physical home, but she's talking about just where you're at. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Yeah, who doesn't know this? You think, "Oh, I just got to do something. And then, but then the voices come out. This, there's something wrong with you. You're never going to do it. You can't leave now. You'll lose everything. You know all those voices. I have a whole poem that's called "The Voices from Hell." That this is all these voices she's talking about in the beginning come from the left brain, and they mostly come from the lower left brain. Character two, the shadow, the wounded child, a part of us. So trauma starts speaking through, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house begins to tremble when you're at that moment when you finally knew what you had to do and began, the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. "Mend my life," each voice cried. Yeah, there's a difference. Those again are voices that come from our survival operating system, and "Mend my life," each voice cried. It's interesting. You felt the old tug at your ankles. Yeah, just resonate with that. That's just perfect. There's a lower part of yourself. Might be the part, you can imagine. When I used to talk to the teachers who taught in preschool, they used to talk about the kids as ankle biters. They would sometimes just grab the teachers by their legs and, "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Now that's a key thing. When she's talking about knowing here, one day you knew what you had to do and began. When she's talking about knowing, there's a conviction, there's knowledge, of course, that you can get intellectually. You can look up things and, you can do research. That's all fine. But at some point in your heart and in your soul, you have to walk on. You have to keep going. You have to follow some a journey. And that knowing is where you get the conviction to leave. If you're thinking about it and you're trying to work it out in your head, you will never leave. You'll never leave the status quo. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations. We're using this image of a house now. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations. Though their melancholy was terrible. Yeah. Uh, it was already it was already late enough and a wild night in the road full of fallen branches and stones. When you're actually moving with the soul, if you're on your soul's journey, and don't take this literally, it sort of sounds like somebody's, walking away from their home life or something. But no, it's the home is that part of yourself, the left brain that just keeps you sort of same old shit, different day life, whether you're dying on the vine or not. And this is the soul moving somebody out on the road. And it always, when you actually do this, and uh, I know this from my experience, I can relate to this. It's like midnight and there's a storm. It's so wild. It's wild to walk away from the known into the mystery of the unknown and where you're headed. It's always dark. It was late enough. And the wild night and the road full of fallen branches and stones. She's leaving in the midst of a storm. And anybody who takes this step, I've done it a few times in my life, and it's always dark and stormy, and everything's trying to get you. Notice all the obstacles, fallen branches, stones. Yeah, she still keeps going, but little by little, as you left their voices behind, because this is about the voices that hold you back. It can be real voices, but it's mostly the voices in your head. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own. Now you go, then this is very honest when you're actually walking on the camino of your own soul. Uh, it, the stars begin to burn through the sheets of cloud. You finally get some guidance in this poem. Literally, you're two-thirds of the way through the poem before you actually get the stars are an image of guidance. You see, you can navigate by the stars. The stars begin to burn through the sheets of clouds, and believe me, the sheets of clouds are your own voices. All those voices. You left their voices behind. The stars begin to burn through the sheets of clouds. And those voices, of course, they're other people's voices, but they become your voices. But then there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world. She's not just leaving the world. It's like not like just Exodus, we're getting out of Egypt, but there, it actually your own voice will take you deeper and deeper into the world. And now you have this conviction, this determination, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. I always add my own line to that when I'm reciting it on the road. Uh, Determined to live the only life you could live, which is your life. The soul is all about a journey of discovery and mystery, and also a journey to flourishing. When you're living your own life, there's nothing like that feeling. Uh, Now, our last poem. And again, so when you leave the known for the unknown, Columbus sailing off, they didn't know, thought the world ended, that fell off an edge or something. Every explorer has to go through mystery, for sure. Uh, but notice this true voice will keep you company at some point. In other words, you start to hear through the clouds of all these other voices, voices of your parents, voices of your religion and faith you were introduced to, voices of the government, voices of the culture, voices of the TV. And this voice will be an authentic accompaniment. You won't feel alone, and it will take you deeper into the world, into the really real of your own life. Now, Wild Geese, the last poem, you do not have to be good. I heard that the first line. I heard David White reciting it on a tape because I didn't know anything about this poem. He said Wild Geese, and he says you do not have to be good. Well, it blew my mind right there. One on the Enneagram. I spent my whole life being good. I was 35 at the time. Really? You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only, this is a great word in the poem, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Well, I had no idea. I was still thinking about that first line. And really, I didn't have much of, I didn't have any idea of the soft animal of your body. I didn't really have any idea of my body at 35. I was still a head on a stick. But this is an amazing permission in this line, and an amazing blessing. He says you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves, and it was a mystery to me, but it sounded like permission. And then she pivots right away because this is if you only had these first lines, you'd have to key to the journey. But she goes on, she pivots, she says, tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. And she's realistic. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. You could talk about how depressed you are. You can, maybe you're in therapy and I had a woman who talked for 30 years about her despair with a therapist. I kept saying, it's time to move on. but she's so accurate. Tell me about the spare years, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. These three meanwhiles. Stephen Colbert, he has a section he calls Meanwhile. While you're kvetching about all the things that are wrong with your life, you know, tell me about the spare years, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. The natural world, this huge world outside the windows here that I'm looking at. It's this world too, but it's different when you walk out this door. You're in that world. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Again, we're getting into directionality here. If you're trying to live your life, that's the home that Mary is always talking about. And the wild geese know how to go back to the Arctic in the summer and how to come down here, although they're tending to stay in Kentucky now. We have a lot of wild geese that stay right here year round. But they have this directional thing. Hummingbirds, and you have a directional thing. Cynthia Bourgeot calls it your GPS, your God positioning system, and that is your right brain, and that is the heart, and the heart primarily is the meaning of the heart. The heart Bluetooths you to the big map here. It's your God positioning system. And then she says, again, the shift of tone, whoever you are, no matter how lonely, and you might know that line. I've known that line. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. She's talking about the natural world. The world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting. The soul is the imagination. All poets know this. The left brain is for measurement. It's for doing things. You getting shit done, and that's great because shit needs to be done. You have to do things, but the imagination is something else. Say, imagine that I'm actually living a life I meant to live. Only the soul has that power, and we have to get much more comfortable with that language and with the soul itself. And that's where we're going when we move into meditation. Okay. And the wild geese are harsh and exciting. So when you really actually go on the journey, it'll be both of those things. Anybody who's walked the Camino knows that it can be harsh and it can be exciting. And those are not, beauty and brokenness. When you go into the real world, you'll see both. It's a complete picture, though, not two, harsh and exciting. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over and over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Some of us didn't find our place in our own family of origins or in this culture, and but you can. And she's talking about here the language of nature, and she's talking about what the Japanese call bathing in the forest, which is they go walk in nature. They leave it, it's like you're bathing in it. When I walk the road, it's just like that. And you have a place over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Okay. The family of the bigger family, the universal family. Yeah, yeah.